Janine Kaur pushed through the heavy blast doors of the remains processing depot, the air inside hitting her like a stale exhale, recycled, metallic, laced with the faint chemical tang of preservatives. Her boots echoed on the grated floor, each step a deliberate anchor against the numbness creeping up her spine. The depot was a cavernous relic from the early occupation days, all exposed conduits and flickering holoscreens, lit by the cold blue glow of terminals that hummed like distant machinery. She clutched her ident chip in one gloved hand, the other steadying the satchel slung over her shoulder. This was routine, she told herself. Final sign-off, chain of custody complete. Her brother's crate waited in Bay 7, just another sealed unit in the endless row. She approached the intake station, where a lone drone hovered, its optics scanning her face with a soft whir. Biocert Specialist Core, Clearance Level 4, processing file HR 4782K, the drone intoned, voice flat as machined gravel. Janine nodded, pressing her chip to the reader. The screen flickered to life, projecting the crate's manifest. Remains of Lieutenant Arjun Kaur, recovered from the siege of Epsilon Outpost. Cause, plasma rupture. Status, intact for repatriation. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed it down. Dignity in procedure. That's what she'd always believed. The Directorate's rules were ironclad, even for the dead. Especially for the dead. With a few taps, she initiated the transfer protocol. The crate's seals glowed green on the hollow, confirming vacuum integrity. She signed digitally, her stylus hovering a beat too long over the authorization line. Arjun's face flashed in her mind, not the charred helmet from the recovery logs, but the way he'd grinned during basic training, all cocky optimism before the aliens turned the war into a meat grinder. For family repatriation, she murmured to the empty air as if the system cared. The drone beeped approval and the crate's mag locks disengaged with a hydraulic sigh. It was hers now, or as close as the bureaucracy allowed. She'd ship it back to the Enclave on Terra Nova, bury him proper under human soil. But as the file synced to the central registry, a red alert pulsed across the terminal. Janine froze, her fingers still on the screen. Anomaly detected, the drone announced. File HR 4782K, flagged for reclassification, issuing authorization token for repurposing under Directive 19B. Estimated processing, 48 hours. Her pulse spiked, hot and sharp in her ears. Repurposing, the word alone twisted like a knife. The Directorate's euphemism for stripping bodies down to biomatter. Organs harvested, bones ground for composites, everything funneled into their endless war machine. Arjun wasn't chattel. He was her brother, the last thread to a life before the invasion. She jabbed at the override query, but the system locked her out. Token generated, recipient Comptroller Sirens Bureau. Human remains now state-authorized resources. Janine's hands trembled as she gripped the console. This wasn't right. Arjun had died fighting, not to fuel some alien factory. The Enclave had petitions pending, appeals buried in red tape. But the registry didn't wait for appeals. It was automatic, clinical, a cog in their grand order. She scanned the alert log, the flag triggered on insufficient familial claim and strategic yield potential. Yield. Like he was ore, the depot's outer doors hissed open again, admitting a gust of corridor air that carried the scent of rain-slicked plasteel from the storm outside. Footsteps approached, heavy, measured, not the shuffle of a clerk. Janine turned, her hand instinctively dropping to the utility knife on her belt. A man emerged from the shadows of the entryway, broad-shouldered in a patched enviro suit, hood pulled low. His face was scarred along the jaw, eyes sharp under the depot's harsh lights. Marcus Hale. She recognized him from the community feeds. Ex-soldier, head of one of those underground protector cells that patrolled the fringes, keeping directorate sweeps at bay. "Specialist Corps," he said, voice low and even, like he was asking for directions instead of whatever this intrusion meant. He held up a data slate, its screen glowing with what looked like official seals. "I need your help. 5 minutes, tops." She stepped back, glancing at the drone which had pivoted its optic toward him. "This is a secure facility. You can't just... Not here to cause trouble." Marcus kept his hands visible, palms out, the slate balanced in one. Polite, almost disarming, but there was steel in his posture, the kind honed from years dodging patrols. "That token on your brother's file, it's bullshit. The registry's been auto-flagging high-yield remains since the last quota push. But you've got level 4 clearance. Sign this counter-auth and we block it." Janine eyed the slate. Forged, obviously. The seals shimmered wrong under scrutiny. A telltale artifact of black market hacks. Her training screamed to report him, trigger the alarm. Procedure was her shield, her brother's last dignity wrapped in forms and stamps. But the token's timer ticked on the terminal. 47 hours, 59 minutes. Arjun's crate sat there, inert, waiting to be reduced to slurry. "You're asking me to falsify records. That's treason under occupation law." Marcus didn't flinch. "Treason's what they're doing to him. To all of us." He slid the slate across the console, close enough for her to see the details. A counter-authorization rerouting the file to pending humanitarian review. It was clever, mimicking the Directorate's own labyrinthine codes. "Your clearance can push it through. Tempers the token, buys time for a real appeal." Or... He let the word hang, his gaze flicking to the crate. "They load him up tomorrow." She hesitated, the depot's hum filling the silence like judgment. Her faith in the system, rigid, unyielding, cracked just a fraction. Arjun had trusted procedure too, filed every report, followed every chain of command. And look where it got him. Marcus stood there, calm as a coiled spring, not pushing, just waiting. Dangerous, yes, but not mindless. Humans like him had kept the enclaves from total collapse, polite fists against the alien tide. "Fine," she whispered, snatching the slate. Her heart hammered as she synced it to the depot terminal, fingers flying over the interface. The system resisted at first, querying authenticity, cross-referencing seals, but her biocert codes bypassed the checks, layering the forgery into the chain of custody. She overrode the token with a fabricated stamp. "Invalid per humanitarian override, Section 12C. The printer whirred to life beside her, extruding a fresh hollow stamp that shimmered with false legitimacy. She pressed it to the crate's manifest, the air filling with the ozone scent of authentication. The terminal beeped green, token neutralized for now. Janine exhaled, a shaky rush of relief mingled with dread. She'd bent the rules just this once. For Arjun, Marcus nodded, a ghost of approval in his eyes. "Good call. We'll handle the rest. Get word to the Enclave lawyers." He pocketed the slate, turning toward the doors. But as he moved, a low chime echoed through the depot. Janine's stomach dropped. The sensors, overhead grids flickering red, had logged the override. Not the full breach, but enough. An anomalous signature in the auth chain. Data packets zipped out via encrypted burst, vanishing into the enforcement grid. She grabbed Marcus's arm. "Wait! They traced it!" He cursed under his breath, scanning the exits. How long? Minutes. The beacon's pinging. Far off, through the depot's outer walls, a distant wail built, a enforcement beacon activating, its pulse syncing with the storm's rumble. Drones would swarm soon, or worse, sirens compliance teams. Marcus met her gaze, unflinching. "You did what you could. Get out. I'll draw them off." She wanted to argue, to cling to procedure even now, but the weight of the stamp in her hand silenced her. This was the cost. Her clearance tainted, Arjun's crate a beacon for the hunters. As Marcus slipped into the shadows, Janine sealed the crate and triggered the emergency lockout, buying seconds. The beacon's ping grew louder, a siren's call echoing her name. In the sterile heights of the Directorate spire, Comptroller Siren's office bathed in the unyielding white of data streams. The alien overseer, tall, elongated limbs folded behind a console of living crystal, tilted its multifaceted head as the alert bloomed across its primary optic, an unauthorized signature on a human remains file, HR 4782K. A faint vibration hummed through the chamber, the enforcement grid awakening like a predator stirred. Siren extended a probe tendril, tracing the anomaly. Human interference, subtle but unmistakable. Efficiency demanded correction. Initiate recovery protocol, it signaled to the grid. Voice a harmonic chime devoid of warmth. The repurposing would proceed. Anomalies were merely inefficiencies to be excised. Janine Kaur's hands trembled as she pressed the forged stamp against the digital manifest, the seal blooming like a false flower on the screen. The warehouse air hung heavy with the scent of recycled ozone and faint decay, the kind that seeped from the crates no matter how tightly they were sealed. She glanced at Marcus Hale, his broad frame silhouetted against the dim glow of the loading bay lights. He nodded once, calm as a man checking his watch before a storm. 3 crates, she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the hum of the conveyor belts. Flagged for immediate repurposing, but not anymore. Marcus didn't respond with words. He hefted the first crate onto the waiting hover sled, muscles coiling under his worn jacket. The crates were standard Directorate issue, dull gray plasteel, each holding what remained of someone who'd once breathed, laughed, fought. Her brother's was in there somewhere, mixed with 2 others they'd pulled from the processing queue. Dignity, she told herself. That's what this was. Not theft, not defiance. Just procedure, bent but not broken. They moved fast, shadows in the labyrinth of the sub-level depot. Marcus led, his ex-soldier instincts mapping the blind spots, where security drones patrolled in lazy arcs. Janine followed, her biocert badge clipped low on her hip, a fragile shield against the scanners. The forged stamp had bought them a window, 30 minutes before the system refreshed and flagged the anomaly. Enough time to reroute these to the private mortuary on the edge of the neutral zone, where human hands could handle the dead without alien efficiency grinding them into authorized resources. At the transfer dock, a lone transport drone idled, its engines whispering. Marcus keyed in the override code. Leon had slipped them earlier, his fingers steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. Leon's got the logistics covered, he said, voice low and even. She'll make it look like a standard shift handover. Janine swallowed, her faith in procedure warring with the knot in her gut. This wasn't right. Forging signatures, diverting state property. But her brother's remains reduced to a barcode in some registry. That was worse. What if they trace it back? Then we adapt. Marcus's eyes met hers, polite but edged with that quiet danger she'd seen in him before, the kind that came from burying friends under alien skies. He was protecting his neighborhood, his people, from the sweeps that turned blocks into ghost towns. Lethal force was his flaw, always simmering, but tonight it was precision he needed, no guns. Just ghosts. They loaded the crates in silence, the sled humming as it aligned with the drone's bay. Janine sealed the manifest, her heart pounding against her ribs. For a moment the warehouse felt vast, empty, like the universe itself was watching. Then the drone lifted, vanishing into the access tunnel toward the surface. Leon Chen watched from the liaison booth 2 levels up, her fingers dancing over the console as if playing a delicate instrument. The directorate channels flickered on her secondary screen, a web of encrypted feeds she navigated with practiced ease. Transport logistics were her domain, bridging the gulf between human desperation and alien bureaucracy. But tonight, she played both sides. "Confirming handover," she murmured into the comm, her voice smooth, professional. On the public log, it looked routine. 3 crates from Depot 7 to Mortuary Auxiliary 12B. No flags, no questions, but her hidden recorder captured it all. The timestamps, the overrides, Janine's signature bleeding through the forgery like ink on wet paper. Her child's face flashed in her mind, detained in some directorate creche, leverage against her compliance. Protect him, she told herself. That's the motive. Trade what you must. But the flaw gnawed at her. Willingness to sell out allies for a scrap of parental claim. Janine and Marcus thought she was all in, but this recording, it was insurance. Leverage against the comptroller, or against them if it came to that. She hit send on the logistics approval, the drone's path locking in, the booth's walls pressed close, the air recyclers hissing like accusations. Community standing was slipping through her fingers. Whispers in the halls called her a collaborator. Fear twisted in her chest, losing her boy, or worse, becoming the monster who handed him the keys to the cage. Across the sprawl in the registry's core, the anomaly rippled through the grid like a stone in still water. Comptroller's siren floated in its nutrient bath. Tendrils extended into the data streams, a symphony of harmonics pulsing from its core. The probe tendril retracted, analysis complete. Human interference, yes, subtle, but the signature traced back clean. Janine Core, Biocert Forensics Specialist. Her professional authority, once a thread in the weave of efficiency, now frayed. Revoke, siren signaled the command, a chime that echoed through the neural net. No anger, no malice, just procedure. The human's clearance evaporated in an instant, her access ports sealing like wounds. Anomalies demanded correction. Repurposing would proceed with or without her consent. But this was no isolated glitch. The recording from the liaison channels painted a fuller picture, coordinated, deliberate. Marcus Hale's neighborhood, that stubborn pocket of resistance. Efficiency required escalation. Initiate punitive condensation sweep, siren ordered, allocating an enforcement squad from the nearest garrison. The block would be condensed, structures folded into resource cubes, inhabitants processed or relocated. Order over chaos. Individual worth? A variable, not a constant. Marcus felt the calm buzz in his pocket as he slipped back into the shadowed alleys of his neighborhood, the private mortuary's confirmation light on his wristband. Janine had peeled off toward her quarters, face pale but resolute. 3 crates safe, a small win in a war of attrition, but the buzz pulled him up short. Leon's voice tight over the line. They've got the recording. Janine's revoked, and sirens ordering a sweep on your block. Starts at dawn. Dawn, 4 hours. Marcus's jaw tightened, the calm facade cracking just enough to let the old soldier's edge show. He keyed his squad's channel, voice steady as he strode towards the central hab block. All cells, this is Hale. Evac protocol now. Grab what you can. Essentials only. We're moving to the undergrid tunnels. The neighborhood stirred like a beast rousing from sleep. Lights flickered on in the stacked hab units, families spilling out with bundled packs. Marcus moved among them, directing with quiet efficiency, polite nods to the elders, firm hands on shoulders for the hesitant. His stake was here. These people, his surviving squad woven into the civilian fabric. Failing them meant more than loss. It meant the directorate won by default. Flaw or not, lethal force tempted him now. A counterattack could scatter the squad before they condensed the block. But that risked all, drawing heat on the evac routes. turning a surgical strike into a slaughter. Rescue first, get half out, then reassess. Morally complex, that's what humans were. Dangerous when pushed, but not reckless. By the third hour, chaos edged in. Only half the block had funneled into the access grates, the undergrid's damp tunnels swallowing them like a reluctant mouth. Kids whimpered, adults muttered prayers to forgotten gods. Marcus covered the rear, rifle slung low but ready, his mind mapping escape vectors. The air grew thick, charged with the distant whine of engines. Then it hit, the sweep. Processing engineers dropped from the sky in grav pods, their suits gleaming under the floodlights. Condensation fields hummed to life, reality warping at the edges of the block. A HAB unit folded first, walls compressing into a neat cube of compressed matter, screams cutting off mid-breath. The squad was still out there, 20 souls scrambling for the last grate. Marcus crouched behind a rusted barricade, heart slamming against his ribs. The engineers advanced methodically, fields blooming like predatory flowers. A counterattack, hit them hard, buy time for the stragglers, risk all, maybe take half the squad down with him, or rescue, dash in, pull who he could, abandon the rest to the grind. Polite words wouldn't stop this. Calm planning felt like surrender. His hand tightened on the rifle. Humans didn't break easy, but choices like this, they scarred deeper than any bullet. The whine grew louder, a field edging toward the grate. A woman, Elena from his old unit, stumbled into view, dragging a child. Engineers turned, suits whirring. Marcus's breath caught, the world narrowing to that moment. Rescue or counter. The cost clawed at him, moral agency hanging by a thread in the alien machine. He rose, decision crystallizing in the brutal clarity of war. Dangerous, competent, human. Marcus Hale gripped the edge of the rusted fire escape, his breath steady despite the ache in his ribs from yesterday's skirmish. Below, the sweep zone hummed with the low whine of directorate drones, their blue scanner lights sweeping the alley like predatory eyes. He could smell the ozone from their exhaust, mixed with the faint rot of uncollected trash. Reminders that the city was dying piece by piece. His squad waited in the shadows. Tomas Vela, broad-shouldered and quiet, cradling his scavenged pulse rifle. Rhea Noor, her fingers twitching over the jammer pack, and a handful of civilians huddled behind them, eyes wide with the kind of fear that came from knowing your name might end up on a processing manifest. "Stay low," Marcus murmured, his voice calm, the kind of polite steel that had kept his people alive through worse. "We move on my mark. Janine scrambling the trackers. Gives us a window, but it's narrow." He didn't mention how narrow. No need to feed their panic. Thomas nodded, his jaw set, while Rhea adjusted the jammer's straps, her dark eyes flicking to the civilians, a mother clutching 2 kids, an old man with a limp. They were the stakes, the reason Marcus had traded his old life for this. Fail them, and the directorate would strip them down to authorized resources, their bodies fuel for whatever alien machine ground on without remorse. The signal buzzed in his earpiece. Janine's code. Trackers offline. Marcus raised a fist, then dropped it. They slipped down the escape, boots silent on the metal, melting into the fog-shrouded streets. The extraction point was 3 blocks east, a derelict warehouse where a hidden shuttle waited, courtesy of sympathetic off-world contacts. Marcus led, rifle low, scanning for heat signatures. His mind ticked through contingencies. If drones flanked them, Thomas would cover the rear. Rhea's jammer would buy seconds. The civilians followed in a tight knot, the mother's whispers urging her kids onward. Halfway there, the air thickened with static. Marcus froze, tasting the betrayal before he heard it, the whine of enforcer pods descending, not scanning but locking on. "Ambush!" he hissed, shoving the old man behind a dumpster. Pulse fire cracked the night, blue bolts sizzling against concrete. Tomas returned fire, dropping one drone in a shower of sparks. But more poured from the rooftops, their chassis gleaming under the sodium lights. "Flank left," Marcus barked, polite even now, as if directing traffic. He grabbed Rhea's arm, pulling her toward cover while the civilians scattered. A bolt grazed his shoulder, searing fabric and flesh, but he pushed through, firing back. Rhea's jammer whined to life, disrupting the nearest pods. But it was too late for Tomas. He took a direct hit to the chest, crumpling without a sound, his rifle clattering away. Rhea screamed his name, turning to drag a kid to safety, only for an enforcer to snatch her from behind, its clamps locking around her throat. Marcus lunged, putting 2 rounds into the machine, but the damage was done. Rhea went limp, her body hauled into a waiting transport pod alongside 3 civilians, the mother and her kids torn away in the chaos. Blood slicked Marcus's arm, hot and sticky, but the pain sharpened his focus. He scooped up the old man and the last 2 survivors, sprinting for the warehouse as the drones pursued. The shuttle's engines roared to life, just as they burst through the doors, lifting off in a plume of dust. Below, the sweep zone lit up with Directorate floodlights, claiming what was left. He slumped against the bulkhead, pressing a rag to his wound, the shuttle's hum a temporary reprieve. Tomas and Rhea, gone. Faces he knew, lives he'd sworn to protect. The betrayal burned hotter than the burn on his shoulder. Someone had sold them out. Coordinates too precise for a lucky guess. Marcus's fist clenched, knuckles white. Dangerous times called for dangerous men, and he was just getting started. In the sterile glow of the Directorate's liaison chamber, Leon Chen stood rigid, her hands clasped to hide the tremor. The room smelled of recycled air and faint metallic tang. Walls lined with holographic manifests, flickering names, human names, reduced to asset codes. Comptroller's siren loomed behind the console, its elongated form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light. The alien skin shimmered like oil on water, eyes multifaceted and unblinking, processing Leon's every micro-expression with clinical detachment. "You have the coordinates," Siren stated, voice a modulated hum, devoid of inflection yet laced with the weight of authority. It wasn't a question. The comptroller knew leverage when it held it. Leon swallowed, her motive a knife in her gut. Her daughter, Mira, 8 years old and detained in a reclassification center for 3 months. The Directorate's bargain was simple: trade information for release. But the flaw gnawed at her. This wasn't just any info. It was Marcus's extraction route, lives on the line. She thought of Mira's drawings, smuggled out in a care package, childish lines of home. Community standing be damned. Motherhood was the one leverage she couldn't afford to lose. "Here," Leon said, sliding a data chip across the console. Her voice was steady, polite, the human mask she wore so well. Exact path, timing, civilian count. In exchange, Mira walks free. No tags, no trackers. Siren's appendages clicked over the chip, absorbing the data in seconds. Authorization granted. The child will be released to your custody within the hour. Note, this transaction is logged as a cooperative adjustment. Further such exchanges may expedite your standing. Leon nodded, bile rising. Morally complex didn't cover it. She was saving one life by dooming others. As she turned to leave, Siren's voice followed, a procedural afterthought. Efficiency demands verification, dispatching containment units. The door hissed shut behind her, and Leon leaned against the corridor wall, breath ragged. Betrayal tasted like ash, but Mira's face pushed her forward. She'd justify it later, or not at all. Janine Kaur crouched in the dim confines of her makeshift lab, a forgotten maintenance alcove in the undercity tunnels. The air was damp. laced with the drip of leaking pipes and the faint buzz of her smuggled authorization core, a fist-sized device pulsing with illicit code, jury-rigged from scavenged directorate tech. Her fingers flew over the interface, inputting overrides to scramble the trackers in the sweep zone. Marcus's team depended on this. One glitch, and they'd be lit up like targets. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her hijab slightly askew from the haste. The core's screen flickered, 78% scrambled. She could hear distant echoes, shouts, the crack of energy fire. Her brother's remains flashed in her mind, catalogued and pending repurposing in a directorate vault. That was her stake. Dignity for him, integrity for the evidence she'd sworn to protect. But procedure was cracking under the weight of reality. The directorate twisted laws like pretzels, reclassifying people as resources faster than she could file appeals. An alert pinged, extraction in progress, but anomalies detected. Betrayal. Her heart stuttered, no time for doubt. The core was overheating, its casing warm against her palm. To fully scramble, she'd need to purge the linked files, her clearance records, signature keys, everything tying her to the system. Irreversible. Destroy it. And she'd be ghosted. No more access, no more pulling strings from inside. But leave it, and the trackers would snap back, dooming Marcus and whoever he was saving. Janine's faith in procedure had been her anchor, rigid and unyielding, but it was failing her now. Her brother's face, pale in the morgue light, urged her on. With a breath that tasted of finality, she initiated the purge. Flames licked from the core's vents as data streams erased, files vaporizing, keys fracturing into digital ash. Alarms wailed in her earpiece, remote overrides locking her out forever. She smashed the device against the wall for good measure, shards scattering like broken promises. No going back. Janine rose, the weight of her choice settling like scar tissue. She'd denied them traceability, but at the cost of her last thread to legitimacy. Now she was as hunted as the rest. Marcus's shuttle touched down in a concealed hangar on the city's fringe, the survivors spilling out into the arms of waiting medics. His shoulder throbbed, bandaged roughly, but the real wound was deeper. The strategic gut punch of losing half the squad and those civilians. He paced the concrete floor, ignoring the medics' protests, his mind replaying the ambush. Too coordinated, someone inside. The broadcast hit like a slap, screens in the hangar flickering to life unbidden, directorate channels overriding everything. Comptroller's siren's form filled the display, its voice narrating over grainy footage. Marcus's team scrambling, Thomas falling, Rhea dragged away. The civilians' screams were edited out, replaced by a clinical overlay of asset tags snapping into place. Containment operation successful, siren intoned. Evacuated sectors, Sector 7B and adjacent zones are hereby reclassified as state processing sites. All unregistered remains and personnel within are authorized for repurposing. Efficiency serves the collective order. The hangar fell silent, the old man from the extraction slumping against a crate, whispering prayers. Marcus's fists balled, anger coiling like a spring. Betrayed, outmaneuvered by bureaucracy's cold blade. Rhea and Tomas processed like scrap, the civilians, Mira's face among them. No, Leon's kid was separate, but the thought twisted anyway. He turned to his remaining squad, voice low and dangerous. This ends at the source. We strike the registry core, reclaim authorization control, get our people out, named detainees first. No more games. Nods rippled through them. Weary but resolute. Humans didn't break easy. They adapted, struck back. Marcus felt the vow solidify, a moral fracture mending into purpose. Wounded, yes, but sharper for it. The broadcast shifted, Siren's image returning. Addendum, bounties authorized, Janine Carr, biocert forensics specialist, Priority for unauthorized data breaches. Marcus Hale, Community Protector. Priority for insurgent coordination. Rewards in clearance credits or resource exemptions. Citywide catalog update commences at dawn. Compliance ensures allocation. The screens went dark, leaving the echo of that schedule like a countdown. Dawn. Marcus met the eyes of his team, the air thick with unspoken costs. They had hours to move, to turn betrayal into reckoning. He rose, decision crystallizing in the brutal clarity of war. Dangerous, competent, human. Marcus gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The hub's auxiliary control room hummed faintly, a relic of pre-directorate engineering jury-rigged with alien overrides. Dawn was hours away, but the weight of it pressed in already, the schedules flickering in his mind like after-images. Janine stood beside him, her face a mask of controlled fury, fingers dancing over a portable decryptor. Ida Park and Thomas Ruiz flanked them, Ida's rifle slung low, Thomas clutching the makeshift EMP satchel they'd scavenged from a derelict warehouse. "We move now," Marcus said, voice low and steady, the anger coiling tight in his chest. No room for doubt. The team nodded, shadows in the dim emergency lighting. This peripheral hub on the city's edge wasn't the main registry fortress, but it housed a vault with the Authorization core, a fist-sized nexus that keyed every reclassification order. Get it, crack it open, and they could burn the whole ledger to the ground. Or so Janine swore, her procedural faith the only thing keeping her from shattering. They slipped out into the corridor, boots silent on the grated floor. The air carried the sterile tang of ozone, laced with the faint buzz of patrolling drones. Marcus led, pistol drawn, eyes scanning the junction ahead. The blueprint Janine had pulled from her forensics access showed 3 enforcement units on loop. Spindly things with sensor arrays and stun emitters, programmed to flag unauthorized biosignatures. No kill protocols yet, not until martial law locked in, but they could summon worse. "Shielding first," Janine whispered, her breath warm against his shoulder. She was close, too close for comfort, but necessity bound them. Tomas knelt, unpacking the satchel. Coils of scavenged copper wire wrapped around a battery pack, humming with induced current. Improvised Faraday cage, human ingenuity against alien eyes. Ada covered the rear, her scope sweeping the gloom. The first drone whirred into view at the corridor's bend, its 6 legs clicking like impatient fingers. Marcus froze, heart thudding. It pivoted, red sensor lights sweeping. Tomas thumbed the activator. A low pulse rippled out, not enough to fry the thing, but to scramble its fields. The drone stuttered, lights flickering, then resumed its patrol, blind to them for the next 90 seconds. "Go," Marcus hissed. They darted forward, bodies low. Janine's hand brushed his arm, steadying herself. Her rigid posture cracking just enough to show the fear beneath. Fear for her brother's file, buried in that ledger, reduced to a resource code. Marcus felt it echo his own. The neighborhood kids he'd sworn to protect, now manifests, waiting for dawn. The vault access was a reinforced bulkhead, etched with directorate seals, swirling glyphs that meant authorized only in their tongue. Janine slotted her decryptor into the panel, code scrolling across its screen. Bypassing biometric lock, 30 seconds. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her voice held that unyielding edge, the faith in systems that had kept her sane through years of processing the dead. Ada whistled softly. "Company." Another drone converging from a side vent. Thomas redeployed the shielding, the hum intensifying, but this one was closer, its emitter charging with a whine. Marcus raised his pistol, sighting the joint where leg met chassis. One shot to cripple, not kill, his code drilled into him from the old wars. Minimize the mess, preserve the line. He fired. The round punched through, sparks flying, the drone collapsing in a tangle of limbs. Alarms didn't blare, yet. But the clock was bleeding seconds. Janine's decryptor chimed. The vault hissed open, revealing the containment matrix. A pedestal of polished alloy cradling the core, suspended in a web of energy threads. It pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of data authorizing every soul in the city for repurposing. "Got it," Janine breathed, reaching in with gloved hands. The matrix resisted, fields prickling her skin, but she twisted the release, procedural knowledge overriding the safeguards. The core came free, a dense orb cool to the touch, its surface etched with authorization keys. Marcus pocketed it, the weight settling like a promise. Out, now. They retraced steps, shielding pulsing against the growing drone chatter. Thomas took point this time, Ada covering. The anger in Marcus burned hotter, fueling the calm, human calm, the kind that had turned tides in forgotten battles. They were competent, yes, but this was no clean op. Every step risked the line between protector and butcher. Back in the control room, Janine hooked the core to her rig, fingers flying. Streaming prep. We broadcast the ledger, every name, every code. Force their hand. Ada grinned, wiping drone oil from her hands. Make 'em choke on their own ink. Tomas nodded, but his eyes darted to the door. Leon's late. She was supposed to... The door cycled open. Leon Chen stepped through, flanked by 4 Directorate recovery agents, tall, exoskeletal figures in hazard suits, pulse rifles leveled. Her face was a stranger's, hard lines, eyes flat with calculation. In her hand, a Directorate beacon blinked active. "Leon?" Marcus's voice cracked the air, pistol rising instinctively. Betrayal hit like a gut punch, the anger surging to rage. She'd been their bridge, the liaison trading whispers for her kids' safety. But this recovery team meant handover. She didn't flinch. "The core, Marcus, hand it over. Comptroller Siren offers clemency for the team, for the neighborhoods. Your fight ends clean." Ada swung her rifle. "Bullshit! You're selling us out?" Leon's gaze flicked to her, cold. "For my daughter. You think I choose ghosts over blood?" One of the agents shifted and she nodded, a signal. The agent fired, a stun bolt lancing out. Ada jerked, collapsing with a gasp, smoke curling from her chest. Dead or dying, Marcus couldn't tell, but the finality ripped through him. "Ada!" Thomas lunged, but Marcus grabbed his collar, yanking him back. The agents advanced, rifles humming, Leon's hand extended. "The core, now, Siren's bargain is fair." Fair. The word ignited it. Marcus's code shattered in that instant, the protector yielding to the soldier. He fired 2 shots, one to her shoulder, spinning her, the second to her leg, dropping her in a spray of blood. She screamed, the sound raw, human amid the alien hum. The agents hesitated, stunned by the breach, protocols glitching on lethal human response. Tomas fired next, dropping 1 agent with a headshot. Marcus covered, pistol barking, another crumpling. The third bolted for the door, beacon squawking summons. Chaos erupted, drone sirens wailing now, reinforcements inbound. "Janine!" Marcus roared, hauling Leon's writhing form aside. Blood slicked the floor, her eyes wide with shock and pain. He'd crossed it, irreversible, the line he'd sworn never to blur again. No more clean hands. For the team, for the city. Janine didn't hesitate. She slammed the core into the rig's port, overriding safeguards with a cascade of commands. Streaming, full ledger dump, every terminal, every feed. The device word, heat building, its unique signature, the quantum key that authenticated every order, burning out in the process. No reversal, no reclamation. The core would be slag after this. Marcus dragged Thomas to cover behind the console, exchanging fire with the last agent. Bullets pinged off exoskeletal plating, but a lucky shot from Thomas shattered the faceplate, silencing him. Leon groaned, clutching her wounds, tears mixing with blood. "You bastard! My girl!" Guilt twisted in Marcus, sharp as shrapnel, but he shoved it down. Dawn loomed, costs piled. The rig chimed, transmission live. Across the city, terminals flickered to life. In cramped hab blocks, on street vendors' screens, in directorate outposts, manifests bloomed. Names scrolled. Janine Corr's brother, listed for neural repurposing. Neighborhood roles, civilians tagged as viable biomass. Schedules stark and clinical. Transfers at first light. Bodies to factories, minds to archives. Outrage ignited like dry tinder. Shouts echoed from the corridors outside. Civilians stirring, fists pounding bulkheads. A vendor in the market district hurled his cart at a patrol drone, screaming a name from the list. In the undercity, a crowd surged toward a terminal hub, faces twisted in fury, human fury, raw and unscripted, cracking the bureaucratic facade. But the directorate responded with mechanical precision. Siren's voice boomed from every speaker, her tone clinical, unyielding, a voice like polished stone. Citizens of the registry, unauthorized dissemination detected. To maintain order, martial law is enacted immediately. Curfew enforced. All designated transfers commence at first light. Non-compliance will result in reclassification priority. The words hung, a noose tightening. Drones swarmed the streets, barriers deploying with hydraulic whirs. Siren's order rippled out, sweeps intensified, agents mobilizing. The exposure had bought them nothing clean, only a spark in the powder keg, and the fuse burned fast. Marcus slumped against the wall, pistol hot in his grip. Janine's rig sparked, the core cooling to inert metal. Eda lay still, Tomas kneeling beside her, checking for pulse. None. Leon's breaths came ragged, her betrayal a wound as deep as the bullets. The anger ebbed to something hollow, war-scarred clarity settling in. They'd pushed back, humans emerging from the shadows. Competent, dangerous, morally frayed. Hours until dawn. The reckoning had just begun. The first light of dawn bled through the shattered skyline, turning the rubble-strewn streets as into a maze of long shadows. Marcus Hale crouched behind a toppled cargo crate, his breath steady despite the ache in his side from yesterday's skirmish. The air hummed with the low drone of directorate drones patrolling the perimeter, their sensors sweeping for heat signatures. He checked his wrist chrono. 0 hour. The civilians, 50 souls, mostly families clutching bundles of clothes and faded photos, huddled in the underground bunker 50 meters back, waiting for his signal. And the remains archive, that crate of encrypted drives holding manifests of the unprocessed dead, sat heavy in the lead runner's pack. "Stay low," Marcus whispered into his comm, his voice calm as polished steel. "We punch the corridor now, or they never see midday." His squad, 3 ex-soldiers like him, faces scarred from sweeps that had claimed too many, nodded from their positions. Reyes, the youngest, gripped her rifle tighter, her knuckles white. She wanted to argue, to pull him back from the edge. But Marcus's eyes held her in place. He wasn't suicidal. This was calculus. The diversion would draw the guards east, opening a clear shot to the old sewer grate that led to neutral zones. And if it cost him? Well, the neighborhood he'd sworn to protect had already taken chunks of him. Failing them now would carve out the rest. He rose, slinging his pack with its jury-rigged charge, a directorate-issue plasma core, rewired to overload on impact. Polite lethality, that's what humans brought to this mess. The aliens expected chaos. Marcus gave them precision. "On my mark," he said, and they moved. The first shot cracked the silence, Marcus's rifle barking from the hip as he vaulted the crate. A guard drone splintered midair, its casing blooming orange fire. Alarms wailed and the squad fanned out, laying suppressive fire on the checkpoint barricade. Bullets pinged off alloy shields, but Marcus pushed forward, weaving through debris like a ghost in the half-light. "Flank left," he called, voice cutting through the din without rising. Reyes and the others complied, their movements synced from years of drills that no bureaucracy could unmake. Directorate enforcers poured from the gate, tall, segmented figures in hazard suits, their stun lances humming. One lunged at Marcus, but he sidestepped, driving his boot into its knee joint with a crack that echoed like breaking bone. "Sorry," he muttered, almost courteous, before slamming the butt of his rifle into its visor. It crumpled and he was past, tossing a flash grenade into the fray. The blast lit the dawn in white fury, buying seconds. Behind him, the civilians broke cover, guided by a runner who knew the paths. The archive crate thumped against the lead woman's back as she sprinted, her face set in grim determination. Marcus glimpsed them vanishing into the grate, safe. That was enough. He planted the charge at the barricade's base, fingers steady on the timer. 10 seconds. The enforcers closed in, their lances crackling. Reyes shouted his name, but he waved her off. "Go, protect them." The explosion ripped through the air, a thunderclap that shook the ground and vaporized the gate in a plume of superheated slag. Marcus didn't feel the heat. He was already gone, his body a shield turned to ash. For the corridor he'd carved. The squad dragged Reyes away as the flames roared, the escape route sealed by his sacrifice. In the bunker's dim echo, the civilians wept quietly, the archive safe. But the cost etched in every face. Marcus Hale had bought their dawn, and the reckoning pressed on. Janine Kaur's hands trembled as she slipped through the undercity tunnels. The recovered ledger clutched to her chest like a shield. The weight of it, pages of manifests, signatures authorizing the directorate's grim repurposing, burned against her ribs. Her brother's name was in there, reduced to a line item, Kaur J, pending reclassification. She'd clawed it from the archives last night, dodging patrols that hunted leakers like her. Dawn's faint glow filtered through grates overhead, but down here it was all shadows and the drip of condensation. The underground tribunal waited in a forgotten maintenance vault, its walls scarred by old floods. Janine pushed through the reinforced door, her breath ragged. A dozen figures turned, human lawyers in threadbare suits, ex-officials with forged IDs, their eyes hollow from too many lost cases. At the center sat Elena Voss, the tribunal's anchor, a former judge who'd bent rules before the directorate crushed the courts. "Janine," Voss said, voice low and edged with fatigue, "you made it." She thrust the ledger forward, along with a stack of selected manifests she'd pulled, proof of procedural violations, timestamps that didn't align, authorizations rubber-stamped without oversight. "This suspends them, 2 sectors at least. Show the flaws in their chain, how they fast-track the dead without appeals." Voss flipped through the pages, her fingers tracing the ink as if it were blood. The group murmured, dissecting the evidence in clipped tones. Janine stood rigid, her faith in procedure warring with the rage boiling inside. She'd believed in the system once, thought stamps and seals could protect the dead from becoming fuel cells or nutrient vats. Her brother's body, lost in a sweep, was her breaking point. But doubt gnawed. Was this defiance or just delaying the inevitable? Hours blurred in debate, arguments sharp as scalpels. One lawyer pushed for broader exposure, risking exposure. Another urged caution, fearing reprisal. Janine spoke up, her voice steady despite the knot in her throat. "They've already processed thousands. This injunction buys time. Sectors 7 and 12 off limits. We force their hand legally, make them justify every stamp." Voss nodded, sealing the motion with a hidden press. The tribunal's network, clandestine uplinks to sympathetic nodes, fired the injunction into the ether. A limited victory, processing halted in those zones, manifests frozen, bodies spared the vats for now. Janine exhaled, the ledger lighter in her hands, but the wind felt fragile, like glass under boot. Her professional clearance was ash. She'd crossed the line from custodian to rebel. As she slipped back into the tunnels, the weight shifted, not gone but transformed. The dead had a voice again, however faint. In the sterile heights of the Directorate spire, Comptroller Siren glided through the command chamber, its walls alive with holographic feeds of human enclaves. The alien's form, elongated limbs sheathed in iridescent chitin, eyes like polished obsidian, moved with the precision of a machine, but its mind churned with calculated fury. The dawn reports flooded in, a diversion at the eastern perimeter, an archive stolen, an enforcer squad neutralized. And now this human tribunal's injunction, worming into the system like a virus. Emergency powers, Siren intoned to the assembled aides, its voice a modulated hum that echoed off the alloy panels. The chamber's air recyclers whispered, carrying the faint ozone tang of overworked servers. Siren had built its career on order, on reducing chaos to ledgers and decrees. Humans, with their sentimental attachments to remains, complicated that. But leverage was key. Turn their morals against them, make compliance the only path. It activated the central console, mandating overrides. The aides, subordinates with lesser carapaces, shifted uneasily as Siren drafted the decree. Reclassify all unclaimed human biological matter as state property, it declared, the words etching into the holographic charter. Communal burial rights are hereby revoked, effective immediately. Repurposing authorized for efficiency protocols. No appeals, no delays. The philosophy was simple. Individuals served the whole, and humans, disruptive as they were, would adapt or be adapted. Siren watched the decree propagate, slicing through the injunction like a scalpel. Sectors 7 and 12 flickered, then complied. Processing queues reactivated, vats humming anew. A quiet satisfaction settled in its core. The humans' legal games were child's play. Bureaucracy was the true weapon, forcing bargains where sentiment clashed with survival. But a flicker of unease stirred. Reports of a sacrificed leader, an archive loose. Humans were polite until pushed, then dangerously competent. Siren dismissed it, focusing on the feeds. Order would prevail. Lian Chen's world narrowed to the cold grip of restraints around her wrists, the sterile interrogation chamber's lights boring into her eyes, captured in the chaos of the diversion. Abandoned by the runners who'd seen her as too risky, she sat slumped in the chair, the Directorate's probes humming against her temples. Her child, Miko, was the stake, held in a protective facility since the sweeps began. Leon had bargained for months, trading whispers of community plans for glimpses of her son. But now, with the archive gone and her value evaporated, the interrogator's voice droned like a death knell. "You facilitated leaks," the alien said, its mandibles clicking. "Your leverage is spent. Custody transfer approved." Leon's heart seized. She'd justified every compromise, the names she'd slipped to Janine, the half-truths to Marcus, all for Miko's face, his small hand in hers. But her flaw had caught up, trading others for her own, eroding trust until none remained. The chamber door hissed open and a feed projected Miko's image, pale, confused, in a sterile dorm. "No," Leon whispered, straining against the bonds. "I can still—" The interrogator silenced her with a gesture. "State property includes familial claims, reassignment to assimilation programs." The words landed like blows, stripping her last thread. Miko's eyes met the camera, unknowing, and Leon's resolve shattered. Rage twisted toward Janine, the woman who'd pushed her into this web with promises of injunctions that meant nothing now. Betrayal burned hot. Janine, with her procedural faith, had used her, then left her to rot. As guards hauled her away, Leon's voice broke in a final venomous vow. "Tell Cor she's dead to me. No more bridges." The door sealed, and with it, the last of her ties to the resistance. Alone in the corridor's chill, Leon faced the void. Child lost, community severed, her moral compromises a noose she'd tied herself. Janine emerged from the tunnels into a safe house, hidden in the ruins of an old hab block, the injunction's echo still thrumming in her veins. But the alerts hit like shrapnel. Decree passed, remains reclassified, her fragile wind gutted. She sank onto a crate, the weight of failure pressing down. Her brother's manifest, safe in the archive, mocked her. Dignity was a luxury the directorate had just revoked. Her hands found the last official stamps in her pocket, directorate seals, symbols of the authority she'd clung to. Faith in procedure had blinded her, made her rigid when flexibility might have saved more. But now, she pulled out a blade, slicing through the stamps with deliberate cuts, shredding them into confetti that fluttered to the floor. No more blind obedience. From the scraps, she worked quickly, etching the authorization token motif, a simple geometric seal, onto a metal disc from her kit. Not official, but evocative, a clandestine emblem for the resistance. Whispers of networks stirred in her mind, falsifiers in the undercity, hackers rerouting signals. Janine reached for the safehouse terminal, her fingers flying over keys. She'd seed it here, protocols to forge tokens, mimic authorizations, divert processing queues into dead ends. Messages pinged out to contacts, Voss, surviving runners, even distant cells. "We fight legal," she typed. The emblems scanned and shared. Falsify, reroute, make them chase ghosts. Her arc bent, from custodian to architect of subversion, moral contradictions raw. The cost, isolation, pursuit, the shred of her old self. But humanity's agency, tattered, scarred, refused to be reduced. As the first forged token uplinked to the directorate's grid, a single defiant pulse. Unauthorized, humanity refuses processing. The system stuttered, alarms flickering in distant spires, and Janine allowed herself a grim smile. The reckoning wasn't over, it was just beginning to bite back.